The billionaire took 3 steps toward his car when a scream ripped through the street. "Stop! If you wear that watch, you will die today." Before anyone could react, a dirty, barefoot girl ran into traffic, crashed into him, and tore the watch from his wrist with shaking hands. Cars screeched, people shouted, and a security guard reached for his gun. Then the girl looked up at the most powerful man in the city and whispered, "I have seen this death before." For a moment, Lagos itself seemed to hold its breath. Adebola Okonkwo stood frozen, staring at the girl who had just assaulted him in front of his own building. His driver was shouting, his guards were closing in, and a small crowd was already forming, hungry for scandal. He had survived boardroom wars, hostile takeovers, and political traps, but never in his life had a stranger spoken to him like this, especially not a trembling street seller with dust on her face and fear in her eyes. "Are you mad?" Adebola asked quietly, though his voice carried danger. Zainab shook her head violently, clutching the watch as if it were burning her skin. "Please, sir," she begged. "Don't put it back. Just don't." The guards moved closer. One hand closed around her arm. Hard. "Sir, give the order," the guard said. "She assaulted you." Adebola raised a slow hand, not out of mercy, but because something about the girl's terror disturbed him. He had seen liars before. This was not lying. This was panic. Zainab could barely breathe. Her chest hurt, her hands shook, and the world around her blurred into noise. She had sworn never to do this again. She had promised herself she would never warn anyone, never interfere, never draw attention to the curse she carried inside her. Yet the moment she saw the dark shadow wrapped around that watch, her body had moved without permission. She remembered the first time she had been 12, selling groundnuts near the expressway, when a woman stepped off the curb with a phone to her ear. Zainab had felt it then. The same burning certainty in her chest. She had screamed for the woman to stop. The woman had turned just in time to die, crushed by a speeding bus. The crowd had not blamed fate. They had blamed the girl who warned her. They called her a witch, Tybee. They chased her until she hid under a bridge, shaking, bleeding, and alone. That day, Zainab learned a rule that kept her alive for years. Never warn, never interfere. Never let them see what you see. Until today, Adebola looked at the watch in her hand. It was his favorite, a gift from Chaik, his closest friend, on the anniversary of his company's first billion. Swiss-made, heavy, elegant, expensive enough to feed this girl for 10 years. He reached for it, then stopped. "Tell me," he said slowly, "why will I die?" Zainab opened her mouth. No sound came out. How could she explain something she herself did not understand? She did not know about shrines, or charms, or jealous friends. She only knew what she saw, and what she saw was always followed by death. "If you wear it," she whispered, "today will be your last day." Behind Adebola, standing half-hidden by the car, Chaik Adebayo felt his stomach drop. Everything was going wrong. For 3 nights, he had counted the hours. 3 nights since the native doctor tied the charm to the metal and told him that death would look natural. 3 nights since he handed the watch back to Adebola with a smile and a brother's embrace. This was not part of the plan. Chaik studied the girl carefully. He had never seen her before. She was not a spy, not an enemy, not sent by anyone, which made her far more dangerous than all of them. Adebola's guards waited for his command. "Let her go," Adebola said finally. The hand on Zainab's arm released her. She nearly collapsed. Adebola took a step closer to her. "If this is a trick," he said, "you will regret it." Zainab nodded. "I know." Silence settled between them, heavy and strange. For the first time in 15 years of power, Adebola Okonkwo hesitated. He slipped the watch into his pocket instead of onto his wrist. "We will talk," he said. "You will come with me." Zainab's eyes widened in terror. As they walked toward the building, none of them noticed that far above, in the quiet offices, time was already moving differently. The charm waited. The day waited, and the future of 3 lives had just changed direction. Chaikarabayo had learned early that friendship was a ladder, not a destination. He and Adebla had grown up in the same dusty compound in Ibadan, 2 boys sharing textbooks, hunger, and impossible dreams. They studied under the same flickering bulb, washed from the same bucket, and swore they would escape poverty together or die trying. When Adebla spoke of building towers, Chaik believed him. When Adebla failed, Chaik stood beside him, and when success finally came, Chaik expected it to belong to both of them. At first, it did. When Adebla borrowed his first loan, Chaik signed his guarantee. When the first contract came, Chaik handled the accounts. When the company nearly collapsed, Chaik sold his motorcycle to pay salaries. They ate from the same plate, slept in the same office, and joked that one day their names would be carved into the same building. In those early years, there was no jealousy, only exhaustion and hope walking hand in hand. Then the world began to separate them quietly. Investors shook Adebla's hand first. Journalists wrote Adebla's name alone. Invitations came addressed only to Adebla. At meetings, people asked for the CEO, not the manager who kept the books clean. Chaik noticed the change before he admitted it to himself. He noticed how people leaned toward Adebla and leaned away from him, how praise gathered around one man like light while the other stood in shadow. He told himself it did not matter. He told himself loyalty was enough. The night everything cracked was at a dinner where crystal glasses rang like bells and rich laughter filled the air. Adebla moved through the hall like a king among equals, greeted by ministers and foreign investors. Chaik followed, smiling, nodding, holding a drink no one asked him about. When a woman asked Adebla, "Did you build all this yourself?" and laughed after his polite denial, Chaik felt something twist painfully inside his chest. He went home that night and could not sleep. From that night on, a new thought began to walk beside him. It did not shout. It did not rush. It only asked a simple question every morning. Why is it always him? Chaik worked harder. He stayed later. He brought more deals, but the distance only grew. Adebla bought a new house. Adebla appeared on television. Adebla was called a national hero of business. Chaik remained the man who stood one step behind, useful but forgettable. The thought changed. Why should it always be him? The idea of removing Adebla from the world did not come as madness. It came as logic. Chaik told himself the company would be safer with him. The wealth would be managed better. The power would finally be shared fairly. He did not call it murder. He called it correction. The shrine was not easy to find. He drove 4 hours into forest roads, where phone signals died and streetlights vanished. The native doctor looked at him once and said he already knew why Chaik had come. No prayers were needed. No tears. Only payment and silence. The charm was tied to the object Chaik named, and the rule was spoken clearly. 3 days after he wears it, he will fall and never rise. Chaik did not hesitate. When he asked to borrow the watch, Adebla laughed and handed it over without suspicion. That trust hurt more than any insult had. Chaik took it to the shrine, watched the ritual, and returned it with steady hands. The waiting began. Now, watching from behind the car, Chaik felt cold fear for the first time since he began this path. The girl was real, and she was dangerous. Adebla slipped the watch into his pocket instead of wearing it, and Chaik understood the meaning instantly. The countdown had paused. The charm needed contact. Without the watch on skin, the ritual was incomplete. 3 days meant nothing if the watch stayed in a pocket. That night, Chaik did not sleep. He paced his apartment, replaying the scene again and again. The girl's eyes, Adebla's hesitation, the guards, the crowd. Fate had introduced a variable he could not control. By morning, he had made a new decision. The girl had to disappear. Not killed. Just removed, sent away. Silenced. If she vanished, fear would fade, and Adebla would wear the watch again. People always returned to habit. Chaik had seen it all his life. The next day, he ordered a discreet background search. Zainab Musa. No family. No address. No records beyond street finds and hospital visits. A girl the city had already forgotten. Perfect. By afternoon, Chaik had arranged men who specialized in moving problems without noise. They would find her that evening, scare her, push her out of the city. No blood. No witnesses. Just absinthe. What Chaik did not know was that Zenab had already been taken somewhere he could not reach. Adebla had brought her into the building, not as a prisoner, but as a question he could not dismiss. He had ordered food, water, and a doctor to examine her shaking hands. He had listened in silence as she told him about the accident years ago, about the warning that failed, about the rules she lived by. When she finished, he believed her, not because of logic, because fear recognized fear. He left the watch on his desk that night, far from his skin, and somewhere in the dark city, destiny adjusted its plan. Zenab had never been inside a building that touched the clouds. The elevator frightened her more than any beating she had survived on the streets. As it climbed, her ears rang, her knees shook, and she kept her eyes on the floor, afraid that if she looked out, the city would swallow her whole. When the doors finally opened, she followed Adebla down a long corridor that smelled of polish and money, into an office larger than any room she had ever slept in. She did not sit until he told her to. Adebla studied her quietly, the way he studied contracts before signing them. The doctor he had called in checked her pulse, cleaned the small cuts on her hands, and left with a look that said, "This girl carried more than hunger." When they were alone, Adebla poured her a glass of water himself. The gesture confused her more than his questions. "Tell me everything," he said. "So, c'est vite." She spoke of the accident by the road, of the crowd that called her a witch, of the bridge where she hid until morning, of the years she spent learning to ignore the warnings in her chest. She did not speak of magic or visions. She only spoke of patterns. Every time she felt that burning certainty, someone died. Every time she ignored it, she survived. Until today, when she finished, her voice was gone. Adebla leaned back in his chair. In all his years of negotiating with men who lied for a living, he had never heard a story told like this. There was no performance in her voice, no demand, no expectation, only fear and relief, as if speaking had already cost her too much. "Do you know who I am?" he asked. She shook her head. "Only that you were going to die." The simplicity of the answer unsettled him. He ordered that she'll be given a room in the guest wing for the night. Not locked, not guarded, just a place to sleep without listening for footsteps. Zenab resisted at first, certain this kindness was a trap, but exhaustion defeated fear. That night, for the first time in years, she slept on a mattress. Across the city, Chaik's men did not find her. They searched the markets, the unfinished buildings, the roadside corners where sellers gathered at dusk. Zanab Musa had vanished. When they reported back, Chaik felt anger rise, sharp and unfamiliar. He had never failed at something this important before. He drove past Adebla's building twice that night without stopping. By morning, the city had already turned the incident into rumor. A mad girl attacked a billionaire. A prophetess saved a powerful man. A thief tried to steal a watch and failed. By noon, journalists were calling. Adebla canceled all interviews. He kept the watch locked in a drawer. Chaik noticed. At lunch, he forced a laugh. "You're not wearing your favorite anymore." Adebla met his eyes. "I'm taking a break from it." Chaik smiled. "Since when do you listen to street girls?" Adebla did not smile back. That evening, Adebla made a decision that would later be called his first mistake. He told Chaik about the girl, not everything, just enough to explain his caution. He spoke of fear, of doubt, of a strange story he could not dismiss. He did not see the way Chaik's fingers tightened around his glass. That night, Chaik changed the plan. If the charm could not reach Adebla through the watch, then the watch must reach Adebla through force. He returned to the shrine. The native doctor listened without surprise. "There is another way," the man said, "but it is faster, and it is louder." Chaik agreed. The next day, Adebla took Zenab with him to a construction site. He told himself it was for her safety. In truth, he wanted to see if the fear followed him outside his office. As they walked among cranes and concrete, Zainab suddenly stopped. "Not here," she whispered. Adebla's heart skipped. "Not here. What?" She pointed to a steel beam hanging above a group of workers. "Move them," she said urgently. He did. 5 minutes later, the rope snapped. The beam crashed exactly where the workers had been standing. Silence fell over the site. Adebla turned slowly to look at her. For the first time, he believed, without doubt. That evening, as they drove back to the office, a black car followed them too closely. Zainab noticed first. The same burning filled her chest, hotter than ever before. "Tell your driver to slow down," she said. Adebla did. The black car accelerated. From the opposite lane, a truck swerved wildly, out of control. In the chaos that followed, tires screamed, metal collided, and Adebla's car spun sideways across the road. When everything stopped, glass was everywhere. Zainab opened her eyes and realized she was still alive. Adebla was alive too. But the watch was no longer in the drawer. It was on his wrist, and the third day had begun. Adebla felt the weight on his wrist before he understood what it meant. The watch was cold against his skin, heavier than it had ever been, as if it had absorbed the night itself. He stared at it in disbelief while the sound of distant sirens faded into the city. The crash had scattered glass and fear across the road, but this was the true danger. The charm had finally found its way home. Zainab's breath came fast and shallow. "I told you," she whispered. "I told you it must not touch you." Adebla ordered the driver to return to the office immediately. He did not speak on the way. He only watched the second hand move, steady and patient, counting time that no longer belonged to him. When they arrived, he removed the watch and locked it in the same drawer as before, but the feeling did not leave his skin. Somewhere deep inside him, something had already been set in motion. That morning, Chaik arrived early. He saw the bruise on Adebla's forehead, the tension in his shoulders, and the fear he tried to hide behind routine. When Adebla mentioned the accident, Chaik acted shocked, concerned, supportive. Inside, relief and panic fought each other. The watch had touched skin. The ritual was awake, but the timing was wrong. Too many eyes were open now. By noon, the symptoms began. Adebla felt dizzy in the middle of a meeting. The room tilted. Voices blurred. He blamed fatigue and sent everyone away. An hour later, his hands began to shake. By evening, a sharp pain bloomed behind his eyes, pulsing with every heartbeat. Zainab noticed everything. She followed him like a shadow, silent but alert, watching for signs she had learned to recognize. When he nearly collapsed in the hallway, she caught his arm without thinking. "It has started," she said. Adebla did not argue. He called a doctor. Tests were done. Blood was taken. Machines hummed. The results came back normal. No poison, no infection, no explanation. The doctor advised rest and observation. That night, Adebla dreamed of falling. He saw himself walking on a narrow bridge over darkness, the watch glowing on his wrist like a small sun. Every step grew heavier. When he tried to remove it, it burned his fingers. He woke screaming, drenched in sweat, certain that the dream was not a dream at all. Across the city, Chaik sat in his apartment, listening to the same message again and again. "The charm is active," the native doctor had said. "Once it wakes, it cannot sleep again. The fall will come." Chaik's hands trembled. He had expected relief. Instead, he felt only fear, because now the death would not be quiet. The next day, Adebla collapsed at the office entrance. Security rushed him to the hospital. Zainab rode with him in the ambulance, holding his hand as if he were a child. Monades screamed. Doctors shouted orders. The most powerful man in Lagos lay helpless under bright lights, stripped of titles and money, reduced to a body that could fail. Chaik arrived an hour later. He stood at the foot of the bed, watching Adebla breathe with difficulty, and felt something crack inside him. This was not the victory he had imagined. There was no satisfaction in watching a friend die slowly. Adebla opened his eyes. "Chaik," he whispered. Chaik leaned closer. "I'm here." Adebla searched his face. "Did you give me that watch to kill me?" The question landed between them like a weapon. Chaik did not answer. Zainab felt the air change. She stepped forward. "It was him," she said softly. Chaik turned on her. "You know nothing." "I know death," Zainab replied. And it came through you. Security moved instantly. Chaik was restrained, shouting, denying, cursing her name. Adibla closed his eyes, tears sliding into his hair, not from pain but from betrayal. That night, the watch was taken to the shrine. The native doctor listened as Zainab explained the visions, the patterns, the accident by the road. When she finished, he nodded slowly. The charm can be broken, he said, but the price will be heavy. What price? Adebla asked weakly. Someone must carry what you were meant to carry. Silence fell. Zainab understood immediately. She had been running from this choice her whole life. I will do it, she said. Adibla tried to speak, but no sound came out. The ritual began at midnight. Chants filled the forest. Smoke stung Zainab's eyes. The watch lay between her and the doctor, glowing faintly in the dark. When the final words were spoken, she felt a pain unlike anything she had known tear through her chest. Then everything went quiet. Back at the hospital, Adebla's breathing slowed. The monitors steadied. The curse had moved. When Zainab woke at dawn, she could not feel her left arm, and somewhere far away, Chaik screamed as his mind began to break. Zainab woke to silence that felt heavier than pain. For a long moment, she did not remember where she was. Only that half of her body refused to answer her. When she tried to move her left arm, nothing happened. Panic rose, sharp and immediate, and she opened her mouth to scream, but only a dry sound came out. A nurse rushed in. You're awake, the woman said gently. Don't try to move yet. Zainab turned her head with effort. The room was small and white, smelling of medicine and rain. Outside the window, morning light touched the city she had almost died for. Slowly, memory returned. The shrine, the smoke, the watch, the pain tearing through her chest. The curse, she whispered. The nurse hesitated. You saved a man's life, she said, but you paid a heavy price. Across the corridor, Adebla Okonkwo lay in a different kind of silence. He had woken an hour earlier, breathing easily for the first time in days. The crushing pain behind his eyes was gone. The tremor in his hands had vanished. When the doctor told him he was stable, he closed his eyes and wept. The first thing he asked was for Zin. They wheeled him into her room carefully. When she saw him standing, alive, strong, and whole, a weak smile touched her lips. You're here, she said. I should not be, Adebla replied. He saw her arm lying useless beside her body. He saw the effort it took for her to speak, and in that moment, all his wealth felt smaller than dust. What did you do? He asked. Zainab looked away. I stopped running. The doctors explained later. Severe nerve damage. Possibly permanent. No surgery could promise recovery. She might never use that arm again. Adebla left the hospital that evening with a decision burning inside him. Chaikadibayo did not leave a hospital. He was taken to a different kind of building, one without doctors or kindness. The curse had not killed him, but it had found the only place left to destroy him. His mind fractured slowly. Cruelly he spoke to people who were not there. He begged Adebla for forgiveness one moment, and cursed him the next. When the doctors said the damage might never heal, Adebla felt no triumph. Only emptiness. Weeks pass. Zainab learned how to dress herself with one hand, how to write her name slowly, how to hide her pain behind small smiles. Adebla visited every day. At first, they spoke little. Gratitude was too small a word for what lay between them. When she was discharged, he did not let her return to the streets. He bought her a small apartment near the river. He arranged therapy. He insisted she return to school. When she protested, he shook his head. You gave me my life, he said. Now you will build yours. The newspapers wrote about the mysterious accident, the betrayal, the mad partner. They never wrote about the girl who carried the curse away. At night, Zainab sometimes dreamed of the bridge, of falling, of a watch glowing in the dark. She would wake sweating, her useless arm burning with phantom pain, and remind herself she was alive. One evening, months later, Adebla took her to the top of his tallest building. The city spread below them, loud and bright. I almost lost all this, he said. Because I trusted the wrong man and ignored the right one." Zainab said nothing. He took a small box from his pocket. Inside was the watch. Broken, silent, harmless. "I had it destroyed," he said. "But I kept this as a reminder. Power does not protect you. People do." Zainab finally spoke. Some power should never be used. Adebla nodded. That night, he made her an offer. A foundation in her name. 4 street children, for those who saw danger and had no one to believe them. For those who needed a second life. Tears ran down Zainab's face. "I am not special," she said. "You are," Adebla replied. "You just paid the price early." Far away, in a quiet room, Chaik stared at a wall and whispered to no one. The curse was gone. The damage remained, and in the space where destiny had once demanded a life, a new story began. Zainab learned that healing was not a single moment, but 1,000 quiet battles. Each morning she woke before the sun, sat on the edge of her bed, and taught her body patience. Some days her fingers twitched with hope. Most days they did not. She learned not to cry in front of therapists, not because she was strong, but because tears slowed the work. Adebla watched all of this from a careful distance. He kept his promise. The foundation opened within a year. A small building near the market became a shelter, then a place where children who saw too much too early could sleep without fear. He named it The Bridge. After the dream, he never told anyone about. Zainab became its quiet heart, teaching with one hand and a steady voice. They never spoke again about the shrine. Some stories, once survived, did not need retelling. But the city remembered. People whispered about the billionaire who nearly died, and the street girl who saved him. The details changed with every telling. Some said she was an angel, others said she was a witch. Zainab listened without correcting them. Truth, she had learned, was rarely as powerful as myth. One rainy afternoon, a boy arrived at the bridge with fear in his eyes. He was about 12, thin as a shadow, holding a broken phone like it was a talisman. "I saw something," he said to Zainab. "Something bad." Her heart tightened. She recognized the look immediately. "C'est l'Istenith." He spoke of a bus, a bridge, a scream that had not yet happened. When he finished, Zainab was silent for a long time. The old fear stirred. Not the curse, the calling. That evening, she went to Adebla. "It may not be finished," she said. He closed his eyes. "I prayed it was." The next day, they went together to the place the boy had described. They waited. The bus came at the break, failed. But this time someone was ready. No charm, no ritual. Just hands, voices, and timing. No one died. That night, Zainab understood something she had never allowed herself to believe. The power was not in the watch. It had never been. It was in choosing to act. Months turned into years. Her arm never fully returned, but it learned small mercies. She could hold a cup, turn a page, touch a child's hair. The pain softened into something manageable, like an old scar that only ached when the rain came. Adebla aged quietly. He left the company to others and spent more time at the bridge than in boardrooms. When people asked why, he only said, "I am paying a debt I can never finish paying." They grew old in the same city, not as savior and saved, but as two people who had once stood at the edge of death and chosen differently. One evening, many years later, Zainab stood on a real bridge at sunset. The river moved slowly below. She wore no watch. She closed her eyes. She thought of Chaik, wherever his broken mind had gone. She thought of the girl she had been. She thought of the life she had not planned, but had learned to love. When Adebla joined her, she smiled. "Do you ever wonder?" he asked. "What would have happened if you had not run into the road that day?" Zainab shook her head. "No," she said, "because then this life would not exist." They stood in silence. Somewhere, a child laughed. Somewhere, a future changed. And though fate had once demanded blood, it had learned, at last, to accept courage instead. Time did what time always does. It softened the sharpest edges, blurred the worst memories, and taught even the deepest wounds how to close halfway. But Zainab learned that some things did not fade completely. They only learned how to speak more quietly. The bridge had grown larger than anyone expected. What began as a shelter became a network. There were centers near the ports, near the highways, near the forgotten corners of the city where danger liked to hide. Children came with stories that sounded impossible, fires that started for no reason, accidents that felt planned, warnings that arrived too late. Zainab listened to them all, not because she believed every word, but because once someone had not believed her. Adebla often watched her from his office window. He no longer saw the broken girl who had saved him. He saw a woman who carried pain the way others carried titles. Calmly, quietly, without asking to be admired. One evening, a letter arrived with no return address. Inside was a single sentence. The charm was not the only one. Zainab read it 3 times. Her hand trembled. She said nothing to anyone that night. Sleep did not come. She dreamed of smoke again. The next morning, she showed the letter to Adebla. His face darkened. "Do you think it's real?" "I think," she said slowly, "that curses do not belong to one man alone." They began quietly. Research. Old shrines. Forgotten stories. They found records of other objects. Rings. Beads. Mirrors. Things that promised protection and delivered debt. Most were believed, destroyed. Believed. Then the first report came. A factory owner in Ibadan collapsed after touching a gold ring sent as a gift. The symptoms were familiar. Headache. Tremor. Fear. The same pattern Zainab had memorized with her own body. She went there herself. The man lived. Barely, when she saw the ring locked in a glass box, her stomach turned. "It's the same work," she whispered. Adebla wanted the authorities involved. Zainab refused. "They will turn it into spectacle," she said. "This needs silence." They built a small team. Dr. Zane, one old woman who spoke very little and knew too much. They began tracking the objects. Not to use them, to bury them. Each one demanded a price. Not always blood. Sometimes memory. Sometimes sanity. Sometimes love. They saved 3 people in 2 years. Lost 2. Zainab never spoke about the nights she screamed alone. One day, the old woman took her hand. "You are paying for something you did not create," she said. Zainab answered, "So did I, once." Adebla aged faster during those years. The work took more from him than business ever had. He grew thinner, quieter, but he never asked to stop. "This is the life I was spared for," he said. Then came the child, a girl of 9. She walked into the bridge, carrying a mirror wrapped in cloth. "I was told to give this to a rich man," she said. "But when I touched it, I saw my mother die." Zainab felt the old cold return. They tested the mirror. It was worse than the watch, not a countdown. A choice. The mirror showed futures, and punished those who tried to change them. The ritual to destroy it failed. The second one cost the historian his mind. On the third attempt, the mirror cracked, but did not break. That night, Zainab finally admitted the truth to herself. This would never end completely, not in her lifetime. She sat with Adebla on the roof, looking at the city they had tried to protect. "I am tired," she said. He nodded. "So am I. Promise me something," she said. "What?" "When I am gone, do not let this die with me." He took her hand. "I promise." Years later, when her hair had gone silver and her steps had slowed, Zainab wrote everything down. Not spells, not rituals, patterns, warnings, how to listen, how to choose. She left the book to the bridge. Went Sadied quietly in her sleep. The city barely noticed. But somewhere, a child read her words and paid attention. And somewhere, a dangerous object waited. Patient, unaware that it would one day meet someone who had learned from her how to say no. The day after Zainab was buried, rain fell without anger. It washed the dust from the streets, softened the red earth on her grave, and made the city look almost innocent again. Adebola stood alone after everyone left, holding the small book she had written with her own uneven hand. He did not open it yet. Some promises were too heavy to touch immediately. The bridge went quiet for weeks. Not empty. Just subdued. Children still came. Teachers still taught. But the center felt as if its heart had stepped out for a while. Adebola kept coming every morning, sitting in Zainab's old office, staring at the shelves she had arranged herself. One evening, he finally opened the book. There were no rituals, no incantations, only stories. Case after case, written plainly. Objects, symptoms, choices made, mistakes. The cost of acting too late, the cost of acting too early, and between every line, one lesson repeated in different forms. Do not seek power, seek responsibility. Adebola closed the book with shaking hands. He understood then that Zainab had never wanted to be replaced. Only continued. He called a meeting. 5 people. Doctors. Teachers. One former street child who now ran security. He showed them the book. "This does not leave this room," he said. "What you read here will not make you special. It will only make your life harder." 3 people refused. 2 stayed. And so the quiet work began again. Years passed. Adebola became an old man in a slow way, like a tree bending gently toward the ground. He no longer chased dangerous objects himself. He trained others to listen, to doubt, to wait. Then, one afternoon, the book saved a life. A young woman came with a necklace. She said it had belonged to her grandmother. She said every man who wore it died within a year. In the old days, panic would have ruled. This time, they waited. They studied. They tested. They found the pattern. Not a curse. Poison, hidden in the clasp. A murder tool passed through generations. They called the police. A killer was stopped. For the first time, the danger had not been supernatural at all. Adebola smiled that night. Zainab had taught them not only how to face darkness, but how not to invent it. When Adebola finally died, he left the bridge to a council, and he left the book to a girl named Aisha. She had arrived at the shelter at 14. Angry, sharp, and brilliant. She had never seen a vision, never touched a cursed object, but she had listened carefully. She became the new keeper. Not of magic, of memory. Decades later, the city changed. New towers, new roads, new dangers. Most people forgot the stories of watches and mirrors. That was good. But one night, a package arrived at the bridge with no name. Inside was a small carved box. Inside the box was a ring. Black, warm, breathing, almost. Aisha did not touch it. She did not call anyone. She opened Zainab's book. She read. She waited. 3 days later, a man came asking for the package. He said it was sent to the wrong place. He said it was valuable. Aisha looked at his hands. They were already shaking. "You are too late," she said. The ring was destroyed, without ritual, without sacrifice, without blood, just fire and patience. That night, Aisha wrote a new line in the book. Not every danger needs a hero. Some only need someone who refuses to rush. Far away, in a village that did not know the bridge existed, an old shrine collapsed in a storm. Buried under mud was a mirror that had never been found. It waited, because some evils did not move. They only waited for time to make people careless. Years passed. Aisha grew older. She trained others. She never told them about Zainab in full. Only the parts they needed. About choice, about courage, about saying no when the world offered shortcuts. One evening, a boy came running into the bridge with fear in his eyes. "I saw something," he said. Aisha closed the book and listened. The first scream came just before dawn. Not from the streets, not from a house, from the earth itself. It was the kind of sound that did not travel through air, but through bone. Zainab woke up with her heart pounding. Fingers clenched into the thin mattress beneath her. For a moment, she thought she was back on the streets again, a child with dust in her hair and fear in her throat. Then the room came into focus. The small apartment, the window half open, the pale blue light of early morning. But the feeling did not fade. Something had moved. She sat up slowly, breathing carefully, listening. The city was quiet, but inside her chest there was a pressure she had not felt in years, the heavy, unmistakable pull of an object awakening. Pamir. She had buried it herself. Deep, far, where no one would look. And yet, someone had. Across the city, in a forgotten construction pit, a group of boys stood in a half-circle around a hole in the ground. They were not thieves. They were not brave. They were only curious. The newest among them, a thin boy called Malik, had found the edge of something hard while digging for scrap metal. At first, he thought it was a broken sign. Then the dirt fell away, and glass caught the rising sun. An old mirror. Its frame was cracked, blackened by time, etched with symbols none of them recognized. "Leave it," one boy said. "It's just trash," another replied. But Malik could not look away. When he brushed the glass clean with his sleeve, his reflection did not move with him. He blinked. The reflection smiled. By the time Zainab reached the site, the boys were gone. Only Malik remained. He was sitting on the edge of the pit, staring at the mirror as if it were a doorway. "Step away from it," Zainab said sharply. He turned. His eyes were wrong, not glowing, not possessed, just older, as if someone else had borrowed them for a moment. "You're late," the boy said. Her blood went cold. "I buried you," she whispered. The mirror's surface rippled like disturbed water. Zainab knelt slowly, her knees trembling. For decades, she had believed the cycle was broken, that by destroying the watch, the chain had ended. She had been wrong. The mirror had never needed the watch. It had only needed time. Visions began to spill out of Malik in broken fragments. A man collapsing in a boardroom, a woman driving into oncoming traffic, a child falling from a balcony. Events that had not yet happened. Events that now wanted to. Zainab understood the truth with a weight that nearly crushed her. The mirror did not predict death. It tempted people into it. By planting certainty, by whispering endings, she had spent her life stopping objects one by one, never realizing they were all echoes of a single source. Now the source was awake again. "Listen to me," she said, gripping Malik's shoulders. "Whatever it shows you, do not believe it." "But it's already shown me," he replied softly. He described a vision of his mother dying in a fire that night. Zainab closed her eyes. This was how it always began. She carried the mirror out of the pit herself, every step heavy, as if the glass were made of lead. That? Evening, the first consequence struck. A fire broke out in Malik's building. Small contained his mother escaped unharmed. The vision failed. The mirror's power weakened, but it did not stop. Zainab took the mirror to the only place she had never tried, the river, not to throw it in, to confront Italiano. She placed it on the concrete bank, and sat before it as the sun set. For the first time in her life, she let it show her her own ending. She saw herself old, alone, collapsing in a hospital corridor. No curse, no object, just time. And she understood the final rule. The mirror could only harm through fear of fate. If fate was accepted, it lost its grip. She lifted a stone and struck the glass. Once, twice. On the third blow, the mirror screamed, not with sound, with memory. Every death it had guided, every life it had bent, every choice it had stolen. Then it shattered, not into pieces, into dust. The wind took it. Zainab remained by the river until night. For the first time in decades, the pressure in her chest was gone. No more objects, no more warnings, no more visions. But as she stood to leave, her phone, vibrated, an unknown number. A single message. "You broke the mirror, but you taught me how to see." Zainab stared at the dark water. The cycle was ending. But not the story. The message did not leave Zainab's mind. You broke the mirror, but you taught me how to see. For 3 days, nothing happened. No accidents. No strange calls. No visions reported in the city. The silence was almost frightening. Zainab tried to believe it was over. She returned to her small routines. Morning tea, slow walks, watching children play in the courtyard below her window. For the first time since her youth, she allowed herself to imagine a future that did not revolve around stopping death. Then the boy came. He knocked on her door just after sunset. He was about 12. Neatly dressed, eyes calm, in a way children's eyes should not be. "I'm sorry to disturb you," he said politely. "My name is Malik." Her breath caught. Not the same Malik. Another. "You don't know me," the boy continued, "but you once saved someone who would have killed my father. Because of that, I'm alive." Zainab studied him carefully. No signs of possession. No strange aura. Just a child. "Why are you here?" she asked. "Because I can see things now." Saeed simply, her heart sank. Inside her apartment, he told her everything. Since the mirror shattered, something had changed in him. He did not see deaths written in stone. He saw moments, crossroads, places where a small choice tilted a life toward survival or toward loss. Not predictions. Possibilities. "I don't hear voices," he said. "I don't see endings. I only see when someone is about to make the wrong step." Zainab leaned back slowly. These was new. The objects had always forced fate. This boy was only aware. "Have you tried to change anything?" she asked. "Yes," Malik replied. 3 times. All 3 people lived. No curse followed. No backlash. Zainab felt something unfamiliar spread through her chest. Hope she understood then what the mirror's final message had meant. She had not ended the gift. She had changed its nature. For weeks, she and Malik worked together quietly. No public scenes. No grabbing wrists. No prophecies, just small interventions. A word to a distracted river. A pause that delayed a fall. A suggestion that made someone choose a different path. People lived not because fate was rewritten, because fear was removed. One evening, Malik asked her a question she had waited her whole life to answer. "Why were you chosen?" he asked. Zainab looked out at the darkening sky. "I wasn't chosen," she said. "I was punished. And then I learned." She told him everything. The streets, the accident, the watch, the years of silence. "When you believe you control death," she said, "you become its servant. When you accept that you don't, you become free." Malik nodded, absorbing it carefully. Months passed. Zainab grew weaker. Age caught up with her quickly now that the tension had left her body. One morning, she did not rise from her bed. At the hospital, she was calm. No visions came. No warnings. Just time. Doing what time always did. Malik sat beside her, holding her hand. "I'm afraid," he admitted quietly. "Good," she said with a faint smile. "Fear keeps you human. Certainty makes monsters." That night, she dreamed of the river. No mirror, no blood, just water moving forward. She died before dawn. Peacefully. No curse claimed her. No prophecy fulfilled. Just a life ending as all lives should. At her small funeral, only a few people came. A former billionaire. A woman who once escaped a fire. A man who never knew why he survived a fall. And Malik. None of them knew the full story. They only knew they were alive. Years later, Malik became a doctor, not a prophet. Not a miracle worker. A man who understood timing, hesitation, and the fragile line between panic and calm. Sometimes, when a patient hovered between life and death, he would feel that old awareness stir, not to predict. Only, he never told anyone where the gift came from. But in his desk, he kept one thing. A small, broken piece of glass. Not from the mirror, from Zainab's window. to remind himself of the final lesson she had given him, that the most powerful warning is not about how you die, it is about how you choose to live.